Hey, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Random Rambling. Last week was the revival episode as I decided to bring these back to have some fun chats with different guests here on the channel. And these episodes are now available on Spotify. And if you're watching this live, this one will be available on Spotify somewhere in the next 48 hours. But for now, if you're watching it live on YouTube or whether you're watching it down the line, thanks for tuning in. And today I'm very happy to be joined by Mike of the channel Mike's Movie Reviews, who I actually met in our local area. We've met up at a bunch of press screenings. We've gotten together and been able to see some movies together. Most recently, checking out The Legend of Ochi together in person. And just really enjoyed being able to get to know this guy as well as check out his content as well. So, Mike, how's it going, my friend?
It's going great. Thanks so much for having me. It's been great getting to know you too. Legend of the Ochi was a cool experience at the Enzian Theater, which was different than most of the theaters we get to go to. So I did like that one. What do you think of that place?
It was cool, man. Like when I pulled up, because Mike will know I was running a little bit late to that one, unfortunately, due to a car accident, and so I was like, oh my god, I don't know if I'm gonna make it, but I made it on time. And when I pulled up, I thought I was just pulling up to somebody's house because it's kind of just like in the middle of this random street with like a house across the street from it. It had like tents around it, so it almost looked kind of when I was pulling up like a house that's being fumigated. But once you get inside, it's like got such like this cool indie theater vibe. There's the old school box office at the front of the theater, like just a classic old like 80s movie or something. And yeah, then you go inside and the theater is strange. We talked a little bit about that day that the theater's set up a little bit strangely. It's kind of like not your typical theater stadium seating kind of thing. It's a little bit more of just like a room with a bunch of tables and chairs, but I thought it was cool. I know you had been there before. Are you a fan of that theater?
Yeah, I've only been there once actually. So this was the second time I saw a movie there, but I think it's
Nice.
very interesting. It's a different experience. It's kind of like an elevated dine-in theater is what I would
Right.
compare it to. With the food being much better, I think. And then also just the arrangement of the seating is so unusual. Some are facing the screen, some are at tables, some face perpendicular to the screen or parallel to the screen. So it's a very interesting theater for sure.
Yeah, it was kind of laid back. It wasn't like necessarily something that felt like I don't know, like it's trying to just be another theater. Like they want you to kind of feel like, hey, I'm in something cool and unique and different. I don't know that I would see all my movies there, but I do think it's like one of those interesting experiences that if you ever find yourself near it, you should definitely go and get a ticket to check out a movie there. But yeah, man, I'm really happy that you took the time. We're gonna chat for about an hour for everybody listening. And one thing I love starting these off with in terms of like getting to know specifically people who make content on YouTube is YouTube can be an awkward experience at first, a daunting experience. The first time you put yourself on camera and you're trying to like figure out how to edit yourself, you have to watch yourself back, all those awkward moments where you're staring at the screen all like, oh, I made a mistake, what do I do? And then you have to watch that back as you edit it. What was it like for you when you first started your channel, and what kind of like pushed you to even want to click create channel and get in front of camera?
Oh, that's a great question. So yeah, I mean, it was super awkward at first, like you're saying. Being on camera is not something I'm accustomed to. I've actually been a filmmaker and a photographer for a long time. So I've always been behind the camera. So being in front of the camera was something completely foreign to me. Um, so I certainly had my share of mess ups at the beginning. But I'm also used to presenting in front of groups and people. So I feel like that kind of helped me out a little bit in that aspect. But what drew me to doing video creation or content creation is I've actually got a lot of friends that do content creation in other genres already, and I see the success that they've had with it and how easy it comes to them, and it just made me want to do this. And I was talking to someone actually in our friend group, our critics friend group, that said, I should really start. I go to so many movies, I should really start publishing my thoughts. And I thought about this for a long time, and I've been doing the written version for a long time, but I thought the next evolution would be video content, and that got my brain spinning. Like, what could I do to kind of not only do this for fun, but eventually make a living off of it? And I thought this would be the place to express my views that people could enjoy, and then hopefully allow me to do this full time eventually.
Yeah, no, that's awesome to hear, man. It's interesting to kind of hear everybody's different journey, right? Because some people start it just as a hobby, but I love the fact that you already kind of had that skill set behind the camera. To that was one thing I did not have when I started. I remember I can go back to my first few reviews that I did, which are for the first Venom film,
Mm.
for The Predator that had come out at the time, the Shane Black directed film. And I remember editing just like the most simplistic edit. Like I'm talking just footage going into me talking. And I was just like, oh my God, I've unlocked the secret tool, only to look back on those videos now and see that they're so like almost like a just like caveman version of my editing style versus today. And so
Mhm.
it's really cool to kind of hear that you had that experience going in, because I'm sure that made at least the editing yourself process substantially easier. And so I'm actually curious, so how did you get into that creative side of things, of filmmaking and the behind the camera stuff? Where did that inspiration kind of start for you?
It started when I was a teenager. Like a lot of kids, I started with skateboarding, and I wasn't any good at it, so I was filming my friends doing it. I became the token filmer. So that actually got me started with editing, and I've always enjoyed computers and technology and stuff growing up. So I decided to then expand into more music videos. A friend of mine was a singer, and I would help him with putting videos together like that. And then I got more into corporate things and more into sports and more into all kinds of just video editing. So it gave me a pretty big skill set to up to today, where I think I filmed just about everything you could think of, from weddings to funerals to everything in between. And that definitely helped. Like I said, I've always been behind the cameras, but not in front of the cameras. So like for you, talking was probably a much more natural thing than the actually editing process was. Where for me, it's the exact opposite. It's like just put somebody else in front of that camera, and I'll edit that pretty quickly. So that was the hardest thing for me to get used to, was to make my thoughts concise about, or concise to put in video format where it sounded natural. Which is also something interesting I thought of when I first started this platform was, I've tried to do many things with marketing and the different roles that I've had throughout the years, but one of the things that's most popular now is short form video. And the more I looked around, I didn't really see anybody doing short form movie reviews that caught my eye in a format that I liked. So that's where I thought my niche would be. And so that's why I've kind of stuck with the short form content. I do longer videos on occasion as well, but I just thought that was an interesting area for me to be in, which could help showcase my editing skills a little more, but also be more concise and attract more viewers.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad you actually brought up your short form content, because that was actually where I was headed next with my next question. So you teed me up perfectly there.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think part of what like really caught my eye immediately with your channel was the short form content, because I am honestly not the biggest fan of a lot of short form content. I think sometimes it can be so built around getting people's attention that it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't oftentimes feels like it has substance. And now, mind you, I'm a sucker for long form stuff. Like right before we started this, I was playing some Xbox and listening to like an over like hour long video.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so yeah, it was one of those things where I started to watch your content, and I don't know, you probably recently discovered that I've been uploading my own short form content more. And I won't lie, it's like a little bit of seeing how consistent you are was like, man, maybe I should try to dip my toes into this. But
Sure.
one thing that really, really impresses me about what you do is the ability to get it in under 30 seconds. How did you master that side of things? Because I'll find myself rambling and just struggling to get my thoughts concise. I'll take a million takes to get to one short video is like a minute and a half, and I
Right.
feel like I still said way more in such longer time compared to what you're able to do in 30 seconds.
Well, thank you for that. First of all, it's very, very flattering. It was not easy for sure. Like you said, we love movies. Anybody that loves movies know that there's a million and one things to say about every single thing that we watch.
Right.
And trying to trim that down into 30 seconds is super hard sometimes. In fact, it's so hard that when I very first started, I found myself repeating the same two or three things, trying to fill up that 30 seconds, because I didn't want to go into another topic that would lead into another topic um, that would make it too long. So I think the best piece of advice I got from the beginning was don't be repetitive, say new things. Um, and that's kind of what I think of. And normally when I end up with a video, I try and we usually go to these screenings pretty late at night or on a weeknight, let's say 7 or 8 o'clock, and then we get home. And I've gotten to the point now where I could sit down and in about an hour create my content for that film. And I save all of my thoughts inside, or I try to, and then I just kind of spit them out all at once. And I find by doing it that way, I get out the most important thoughts first. And I may have to trim a couple of them out. Like most of the time, I'll end up with like a minute long video or so. And I'll have to cut out 2 or 3 statements. Which I wish I could leave in there, and I do leave in there in my written reviews. So what you are seeing in the short form is not all of my thoughts. I do write an article for every single review that I do, or every movie that I watch. So that info is in there if you want to check that out. But to fill up that short amount of space, I just stick to the key points, the most important ones, and then I leave the rest for the article. And that's my way of calming myself. Like, I know I didn't talk about this in the review, but it's in the article if you want to read about it.
Right. Yeah, no, I think you do a great job of it, man. And that's not just to like blow smoke up your ass. Like I look at that kind of content, and there's a lot of friends I've made who have had some success with TikTok and Instagram. And anytime I kind of got into it, I would always like start up and stop, start up and stop. And then I would always focus all my energy on YouTube, which I'm a sucker for long form content. I love the ability to just kind of ramble for 10 minutes and edit it down to whatever works and have fun with like a longer video. But we do live in a time where people's attention span is not the same across the board as it used to be. And so, yeah, as somebody who's dipping their toes into short form content now a lot more, yeah, I find it to be challenging, dude. Like my goal is like get it under 2 minutes. Mm-hmm. But I just feel like I will look at the time that's recording after I start, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm already a minute and 12 seconds in, and I feel like I haven't gotten to the meat and potatoes of it, So when I watch yours, that timer starts up, you have that sound effect of the countdown, and you've gotten across what I got across in sometimes an 8-minute video in 30 seconds. I think that's definitely something that's impressive for sure. It's part of why I wanted to invite you on, because I think that kind of approach to talking about movies is something that the world needs right now, right? Like just something to keep people engaged in the big cinema of today, or big or small movies, but that maybe stuff that people aren't willing to know about or haven't heard about, and I think, having short form content that gets straight to the point is definitely
yeah.
the best,
I think it introduces you to an audience you may not get otherwise as well, right. Especially on platforms like YouTube. I mean, like you and I will sit down and watch a 20-minute dissection into a movie, or heck, I've even watched hour-long videos about one film before, and I'm sure you've done the same thing. But for the average moviegoer or the average person that may not go to the movies that often, they just want to know, hey, is this going to be worth my time and money to go see? Do I want to spend $120 for my family of 4 to go see this movie in a theater, or should we just wait till it's free on streaming on some platform that I already paid for? So I've always been a big proponent of trying to get people to keep going to the theaters, keep the theater experience alive. That's very important to me. I think that I don't want to see that go away. And I think that if we're even reaching a fraction of an audience that we may not meet or reach from that long form content, I think that's what's most important. And I've actually had people that I never would have thought would have seen my content before actually come up to me and say like, oh, you do movie reviews, right? And I was like, yeah, how do you know that? Like, they don't follow me on anything, that just comes up in their feed. Or if they look up something about a movie, I'm a short that comes up in their feed. And they all tell me like, oh, I like that I can know if it's good or not, or whether or not to go see this. Like having that informed decision before they spend the money, something people really appreciate, especially, in 2025 right now. So that's another reason I feel like I almost owe it to people to have a shorter version out there. Now, that's not to say that I don't want to do like a deep dive reviews. Like I'm actually thinking about doing a longer form video for Sinners, like that, since that's a recent one that I saw that's pretty complex and it's hard to narrow down everything I want to say about that film in 30 seconds. But there are movies out there like that. And I certainly want to keep up with doing the long form content too for the movie nerds out there like you and I. But I think it's also important to really focus on just trying to reach the average person, getting them in the theater. And I like what you said about movies that are small and big. I mean, it's important that we bring attention to originals or films that people may not even see. They don't always perform the best on my channel. Like it may not reach a broad audience, but sometimes things surprise me. So there was foreign films that I thought would never reach an audience. and it didn't for a long time. And then all of a sudden I look and, there's another 10,000 views on that one I thought no one had even heard about. So you never know what is going to speak to an audience or what people are going to be talking about this month, next month, a year from now. We may have covered a film already this year that isn't going to be popular, or people aren't going to be talking about it until 6 months or a year down the line. You just never know. So
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Like, I think the joy of doing what we do is like it's great to cover the Marvel movies. It's great to cover, even something like Sinners that's like got a lot of buzz right now. But you got Ryan Coogler, you got Michael B. Jordan. You knew the movie was at least going to get eyes on it. But it's also cool to cover more niche films. I always think it's interesting. When I'll cover something that maybe I was set an early screener for, or something that I randomly caught in theaters that was just kind of like a whatever movie that I just went to go see something new. And then it turns out to be a good time, or even if it's a bad time. And then that movie will just kind of blow up within a niche audience. You find that a lot in horror as well. I tend to cover Shudder releases, which are a little bit hit or miss in terms of quality, I won't lie. But the movies can be so niche, and you don't have all the big people like Chris Stuckman or Jeremy Johns and all these other big channels covering it. So it gives you this opportunity to kind of find an audience of like, oh wow, look, somebody did like a review on this random movie I caught on a streaming service. And so you mentioned a little bit about originality there, and I actually want to ask you a question that I asked my guest last week, Sarah of Popcorn Chat. Shout out to her. We were talking about originality in film, and I was telling her that I struggle with the notion that there's no originality in film anymore, because there's just so many movies that I watch that I think are original, or at least have an identity. And I always hear people complain about the sequels, the remakes, the reboots, the re-sequels, the legacy sequels, whatever. And people act like those are the only movies coming out. And I'm of the opinion, which might be a hot take, but I'm of the opinion that I don't think you can complain about having no original movies if the movies you're going to see is Cars 7, or the next Marvel movie, or the next Bad Boys, or anything like that. So what's your take on original film? Do you think we live in a world where there's not really original film anymore, or do you think people are just not giving credit to what's out there?
I think it's I think it's just people aren't giving credit for what's out there. I mean, like you said, the opportunity is there for people to go see movies like that if they want to go see them. And there's been tons of movies that have been, I'm trying to think of a few in my head right now. I know a lot of sci-fi originals have come out over the last couple of years where people just didn't go see them because they didn't know what they were about, or the marketing wasn't as good. I mean, obviously these studios know if they pump a lot of marketing into a Marvel sequel, or an animated sequel, or something that is a remake or whatever, that they're going to get the people to show up because they're familiar with that material. And it's kind of not nostalgia bait, but almost like, we know you like this, so come back and see the next version, or what we're going to do with it next. And that'll get the butts in the seats. And that's what they're concerned about, because those are their money makers, right? That's how they, make all the money basically for the rest of their studio. And then what drives me crazy though, is there's so many missed opportunities for studios that are releasing original films, but they're just not releasing them at the right time of year, or they're putting them out when another big release is going on. So you're going to miss that. You're going to miss that original that comes out. I think this was you I was talking about. There was a film, a Halloween or a horror film last year. Do you remember which one it was called? It was the one with all the like pumpkin theming and a fall time setting, and it came out the same weekend as was it Barbenheimer? I think it was that weekend.
Do you remember what it was about?
Yes, but I hate giving away spoilers.
Or do you remember like the base premise was?
Was it Haunted House? Maybe. I'm going back through my notes to see if I can find it. But anyway, there was a really good horror film that came out just at the wrong time of year,
Right.
and the studio dumped it like they were just trying to get it out there. Was it Oddity? No. Oh, actually, yeah, Oddity was another one that came
Oddity's
out.
one I heard good things about last year, and I never got around to it, but it's on
Right.
my list to catch up on.
And it was like, I think it came out the same time as it was Deadpool and Wolverine, or something came out like that weekend that just wasn't even going to stand a chance. And it was in July. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not looking for horror movies in July, or that just, I think it matters when a studio places a release that they have no faith in.
Right.
And my whole point to this is, if studios were more attuned to marketing the originals as much as they market the non-originals, I think we would be in a better place as far as people recognizing, hey, yes, there is original stuff coming out here, and it is good if you give it a chance. But you're walking into something new, and I guess people like comfortability, and they like being comfortable with what they're seeing, and they go with what they know. Um, so maybe that's it. I just think that if more people and more studios gave originals a chance, things would be much better.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that we do live in a time where there's original films, but yeah, I do think that's a big problem. What you mentioned there is like the smothering of a lot of these original films and this monsoon of content that's coming out. Because I do think that there is something to be said about competition these days, right? Not even just in theatrical releases, but with streaming, YouTube, music, video games. Like there's just so much competition for entertainment these days, and unfortunately a lot of like great movies get squandered. But then there are movies that people hear about that you may even hear people just say, I'm not going to see that because whatever, like I'm going to go see this instead, or like that looks silly so I won't give it a shot, even if it has good reviews. The one that I'm the most heartbroken still about from this last year is Better Man. Like that was my favorite movie that I saw in 2024, and it just breaks my heart that it bombed so hard in theaters. But it's like the amount of people that I know that were just like, oh, the dumb monkey movie, the dumb ape movie, or whatever, like that or I don't know Robbie Williams, so that means I shouldn't watch it. It just was so frustrating to see, because I think there's a really great movie there, or a movie that's at least enjoyable. Maybe you won't love it as much as I did, maybe you won't connect to it as much as I did, but that's just one example. But there's so many movies every year. Another one from last year that a lot of cinephiles saw, but one that I feel went under the radar was Hundreds of Beavers. I don't know if you got around to Hundreds of Beavers, but that's such a unique, interesting, original film in a lot of ways. But it just does, unless you're part of the film world, you just don't really hear people talking about these things. But you will hear the people complain that they're getting another Marvel movie that feels unoriginal, or that they're getting another Disney remake, or they're getting these things that they're still funding, to some degree. Maybe like Snow White wasn't like a success as earlier this year, but like the point being that like people are still like specifically going to see these things, or even discussing these things online, in comparison to the wide array of things that actually are being released out there. So yeah, I was interested to hear your take, and I think you make some really good points there for sure.
Yeah, and I actually just thought of that movie I couldn't remember before. The same weekend as Barbie and Oppenheimer was Cobweb. So
Cobweb. Yeah, which one was that one? I think I saw that one.
That was the one with like the spider person living in the walls.
Right.
There was pumpkin patches, all this beautiful like fall scenery. If they would have released that in October, I think people would have shown up in droves to see something like that.
Right.
But you dump it on the same weekend as the two biggest films of that year in July or whatever that was, nobody's going to go see that. So.
Right. Yeah, no, that tends to happen even with big releases in theaters. Every here and there you have a movie that gets like sandwiched in between like a bunch of popular movies, and it might even be something that would have done well, but it just gets completely smothered. And so I'm curious to see what pans out this summer. It's hitting the beginning of summer movie season, I believe, next week with Thunderbolts.
Yeah. So many movies this summer too.
Yeah, there's a lot of big ones, a lot of big IP movies, and a couple of just like random movies in the mix. And it's going to be interesting to see who comes out on top in terms of like, box office draw. It's really interesting to kind of see what plays out every year, because we're also in this weird time too. And I'm curious your take on this, where the things that we're definitely going to win before in terms of money are showcasing that they're not, like even with people's criticisms, Disney live action remakes have just slowly gone down, with Snow White being like a new low in terms of box office, winning. And it's even caused Disney to say like, oh, we're going to slow down on the remakes for right now. And even something like the Marvel movies, we've seen diminishing returns in the previous years with things like the Marvels and some other movies that have come out. But we've also had ginormous successes like Deadpool and Wolverine last year. But this year, Captain America: Brave New World didn't do incredible numbers, in terms of compared to the budget, of course. So what's your take about like these quote unquote bulletproof franchises that are starting to kind of find themselves in a place where they're no longer super bulletproof?
Yeah, I think what we're going to see is if they're going to pull back on that thing. So first of all, I think that the definition of a franchise is kind of structured around the films that come out within, let's say, like a 20-year time frame that have to do with that particular franchise in today's world, because we're starting to see franchises from 20 years ago pick up steam today. And I
Right.
think that is the latest trend in Hollywood. So I think the extenuation of the MCU, people have seen that diminishing returns for years now, ever since after Endgame. Everything that's been released after that, okay, well, we're trying to get into it. We're trying. Oh, it's not so good anymore. Oh, this is terrible. Let's stop doing this. And yet they're still cranking out the releases, but they become a little less frequent. Whereas now we're seeing stuff, especially in the horror genre that I can think of, that was popular 20 plus years ago. Those are starting to get sequels and add-ons and reboots, or there's long breaks between franchise sequels. Now, some of that was due to the pandemic and everything, but like look at Mission Impossible this year finally coming out. I mean, that started in the 90s or something, that franchise, I feel like. And
Right.
yeah, so I think it's really interesting. So we're getting the next, I Know What You Did Last Summer, or we're getting the next 28 years later. I was joking with my sister the other day. I was like, I wonder if they're going to do it 28 decades later after we get through this one and have that come out 280 years from now. But I just don't. I mean, there's so much that they're pulling from series from 20 plus years ago, that I think that's going to pull in more audience than, let's say, the next MCU movie in something we're familiar with from recent times. So
Right.
I think that's kind of where we're going to see things going. I'm not a huge fan of beating a dead horse, which is kind of like what they're doing at this point with certain Marvel things, especially. That's the biggest one that comes to mind. But I think something like that just needs a fresh start at this point. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting to see, right? Because I think it is one of those things where the heart, or like distance makes the heart grow fonder, right? Like that's that
Mhm.
classic saying. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of these reboots, or what they call the re-sequel, like the legacy sequel that's like a reboot, but also a sequel to the OG stuff with new characters where people can hop in, but they might be a little lost if they don't know who all the characters are from the past and all that kind of thing. I think some have done it really well. I think, when I look at like something like the
Scream?
Scream franchise, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. I was going to jump to that. Like
Mhm.
Scream did it really well, and it played on itself, of course. And then the next one was just called Scream 6, but it played at that point. The re-sequel had already become a thing. And I think that movie was part of like coining that term as well,
Mhm.
where it's like, they were coming back, but they had already seen tons of other franchises come back with the new installment that has the same name. The Halloween franchise did it, where like now you have 3 different films in the Halloween franchise that are called just flat out Halloween, with the
Right.
Rob Zombie remake, and then the newer
Yeah.
reboot remake that's part of like a second continuity that, if you don't count the original like line, it's just like it becomes a lot, but the reality is that those movies do, if you do it right, it can be done well. And then there's the sequels for franchises that take a long time, or they just decided to kind of take a dirt nap for a while, and now they're coming back. Final Destination is one of them, where it's been
Right.
quite a few years since the last one. Similar kind of with the Saw franchise. They took a few, good. There used to be that time where it was like every Halloween you had a Saw movie. Then it was
Right.
gone for a while, and then they did Jigsaw, and then it was like there was a hype, and then it was gone for a while, and then they did, the other one, Spiral, and it was like, oh great, and then it was gone for a while, and then they did Saw X, and it's like, and now we don't. There's the rumors that we may not get the next one, but
Right.
I think it all depends, because it is one of those things where like the more time you have away from a movie or a franchise, the better chances it is to kind of like reap the benefits of like nostalgia, to some degree. Whereas like I look at something like right now this weekend, right? Star Wars Episode 3: Revenge of the Sith is in theaters for its 20th anniversary, and I know so many people that are so excited to go see it. But when those movies were coming out, they weren't necessarily like the most beloved. I remember having so many adults tell me like, "Oh, you're like essentially telling me I'm an idiot for liking these movies," right? But they came out at the prime time for me,
Mm.
and not even that. I just didn't have like that outlook that a lot of people had from growing up with the original trilogy. The same way that now I have that outlook of having grown up with the prequel trilogy being the new Star Wars at the time, and now we have the sequel trilogy and all the modern day Star Wars. And some people treat the new stuff the way that the prequels were treated for them when they were younger. And so,
Right.
but now Star Wars is like hyped this weekend. Everybody's so excited to go see a movie that ultimately, again, wasn't necessarily beloved in its time, but now is beloved. And but still people are like kind of dogging on the new stuff. So it's one of those things, it's not necessarily a one for one on what we're talking about here about like a franchise returning, but the idea that like distance that even though you can watch Revenge of the Sith anytime, that ability to be like, oh, it's coming out in theaters again, we're celebrating, it's like everybody's like, oh, this feels like a resurgence of nostalgia. And so I do think that's why we're seeing a lot of like reboots and resequels and remakes just doing well if they have enough time between them.
Right.
Sometimes they do it and it doesn't do so well,
Yeah. So what also kind of drives me crazy is most of the time when they make these reboots or resequels, they're not as well made as the original. And the
Right.
original is held in good regard for a reason. And it's because they're great films. I think the closest one that I've seen that I can remember in recent memory, at least, that actually did kind of do a pretty good job was Twisters. So the original Twister was great, loved it, and they came out with that requel or whatever, and I'm like, well, we'll see how this goes, and it actually wasn't bad. Like, it was very well made, and it's like a rare thing to see something to put that much care into a film. Now, thankfully, that was never turned into a franchise where we got Twister 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Right.
And then 20 years later we get that. That's why I kind of think, but oppositely, if we're looking at like the Scream movies, let's say, I'm not saying they're not well made, but it doesn't have that same feel as the original did or the next
Right.
couple of sequels did. And I know people always say, the sequel's never as good as the original. I think we almost need that to be able to justify why we want sequels in the first place. Otherwise, you're just not going to get the same amount of people in the theater for those experiences. So
Yeah, it's tough, and there are sequels out there for certain franchises, and I think sometimes what ends up happening is that you will have a sequel from time to time that is better, maybe even two sequels that's better than the original, and that just creates this like, well, let's keep trying to like get to that next sequel that's better than a previous one. And so
right.
what you'll end up happening is you'll end up having like a few installments that are maybe enjoyable but like lesser than the previous installments, but then the next, maybe like the fourth or fifth one, ends up being better than the last two. So then it's like, oh, they're on a high again, but they're still not as high as they were like near the beginning of the franchise.
Right.
Bringing it back to Star Wars, probably a lot of people would say that too, even though I think Star Wars has so much to it now that like you could be like, this is a high, this is a high, this is a low, this is a mid kind of thing.
Sure.
Whereas like, at the time, like Empire Strikes Back for most people was like, oh, this is like a leaps and bounds, over the original film. It feels like, okay, this is a sequel done right. Depending on who you talk to, I'm sure some people have different takes on that. But yeah, I do think that's one thing we see for sure. Like we have that new Final Destination movie coming out that I already mentioned. And like, it looks fine. It looks like they're very much cashing in on like people want to just see a new Final Destination movie. So will it be any good? It's tough. Sarah, who I had on last week, we were talking about it a little bit, and she mentioned like, like that Texas Chainsaw Massacre that they did on Netflix, a few years ago that just was like terrible.
Yeah, it was an interesting choice on that one.
Right. And if you look back at the original, right, and how iconic it is and how like creepy and just grungy it felt for its time, and like how it inspired like a generation of like those kinds of horror films. It's just one of those things where you're always trying to capture something like that classic lightning in a bottle kind of thing that you just don't necessarily know if you're going to be able to like.
And I mean, that's a great example. So the Texas Chainsaw has probably had just off the top of my head, I'm thinking of like 3 or 4 remakes that they've done. The only one that even was slightly enjoyable to me was that Jessica Biel one. I think it was
the one in the 2000s.
The 2000s one. That one I thought was pretty okay, but then they just got so bad. They had that 3D one with my favorite. What was it? There was like a rapper in that one. I think I forget his name, but my favorite scene of that movie is when they're like playing pool at a party in this house. And they have his song on in the background, like, oh, this is a great song. And they're just talking about it like they don't realize that's him that's rapping in that song. Like, how corny is that? Just a shameless plug for that musician. But it's like you could do it right, like they did with the Jessica Biel one, or you could do it completely wrong and make a farce out of it, like they did with that one. It's just, they're just trying to, it's a money grab at that point, right? It's just a money grab. So I think Hollywood needs to stop teasing audience people. I mean, we'll go see movies regardless,
Right.
but for the average person that has a budget and needs to control what they're spending, and they have a life and they're busy doing other things, to get people to keep showing up at the theaters, I think that should be the goal for everyone in Hollywood,
Right.
whether it's a
Yeah.
sequel or an original.
It's true, yeah. I totally agree, and I think it's one of those things too. Like not just on the like the sequel or reboot thing too. Another thing too is like those movies that are just like the same. You know, earlier this year, one of the movies that we saw sitting next to each other was Working Man with Jason
Right.
Statham, and I like Jason Statham. I think he's
Mhm.
put out some of those movies of his that are like a really good time. I enjoyed The Beekeeper from last year because it was like
Mhm.
kind of tongue in cheek and knew what it was. But Working Man, I wasn't a fan because it's just like it feels like even though this isn't a franchise that I've just seen this time in and time out. So what are your thoughts on like certain kinds of movies or like certain actors who do a certain kind of movie that it just like, kind of like when Liam Neeson was on that run after Taken? Like what are your thoughts on
Right.
those kind of movies where it's like just the same movie with a new name that isn't a franchise but is essentially the same movie over and over again?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's like music, right? So in music, you can have the similar style, same beat, same pattern, the same rhythm, whatever. And if you like that kind of music, you're going to listen to that kind of music over and over. And I think general audiences are the same way, right? So if you like the mindless action of a Jason Statham film, or you like Liam Neeson with that crazy voice that he does when he gets all serious, and you enjoy that, and he comes out with another one, you're like, oh, I like that. I know I like that. I'm going to go see that again. It kind of comes back to the sequel thing, the way I was kind of framing that. It's people that like what they're familiar with, and if they like that Liam Neeson character that we've seen probably 100 times, or at least a dozen times since Taken, then they're going to go see that next Liam Neeson movie. I think the last one I saw was one where he's like in that car with the kid or whatever, driving around trying to.
Right. I didn't see that one. I know which one you're
Yeah.
talking about. Now
So,
he's got the Naked Gun remake
oh,
coming out.
right.
Yeah.
Totally different. So, hey, that's also good too, because now he's in a different role, but people are like, oh, I liked him in Taken, so maybe I'll like this one too. And that might get the ball rolling for people to be exposed to different kind of cinema. So that's good. But overall, I think that this is just movie studios appealing to that consumer that likes seeing that particular movie style. But on a personal level, just like you, I think we've talked about this before. The weirder, the better. The more unique, the more unusual, the better. I will never forget. So I was traveling last year around the time that Poor Things was hitting like a nationwide release, and I took my brother to see it. And he's like, "What the heck did we just watch?" So he's got a family and stuff, and never gets to go see, like quote unquote adult movies anymore because he's just taking kids to stuff. But
Right.
he's like, "I'm glad I saw it, but what was that?" He's like, people are just sitting in large chairs at big tables, burping out bubbles. Like he was very confused. And hearing him describe this to other family members and friends was just hilarious to me. But I love getting out of my comfort zone and seeing something that I don't wouldn't normally like to watch or wouldn't see in a theater with my friends. So if I'm going to the movies with my friends, we'll all go see like a Marvel movie, or we'll see like what the latest greatest things. Like everybody I know that I'm talking to now, they're all going to see Minecraft movie or Sinners, like because those are
Right.
the two that people are talking about. And I want to see something different than that. So yeah, I love people that take a chance on film. I think it's great for people to experience different stuff like that. I remember when I saw The Substance theaters last year, there was this group of like middle-aged women sitting next to me. I'm like, do they even know what they're in for right now? Because I cannot wait to see their reaction to this stuff. And they took it like a champ. But I mean, it's just fun to see who's around you and what movies they choose to go see. Another theater experience that was unique was Challengers, I remember last year. But I think that if we push people, like pushing the bounds of cinema is amazing, but I don't think necessarily it's great for the economy of movie making. So you hear a lot of directors say like one for them, one for me kind of thing, with where they
Right.
do one for the studio and then one for themselves, like a passion project or something they really want to do on their own. And I have a lot of respect for that. And I think almost the studios need to treat the general audiences like that as well. And I kind of think they are to an extent. I think that we do get a lot of crowd pleasers, as I would call them, but then we also get a lot of weird stuff too, which I appreciate. But I do think that those films should also be pushed into more wider release. I think a lot of times movie theaters especially are drawn to carrying those bigger films on more screens and for longer. So sometimes we may only get like what's one I'm thinking of recently, Presence, that with the Steven Soderbergh kind of experimental horror movie where you see it from the perspective of the ghost.
Right.
That wasn't even in the theater chain I normally go to. That I had to go to a different theater chain to even watch. So there's things like that I think if I'm not able, if I have to go out of my way to see it, certainly other people have to too, and then that's going to put it off of more people of going to see it. So I think that while the studios are fair in what they choose to release, I think the actual release of things can be handled a little bit better, both with marketing and with theater releases. I don't know how it works with like, do the theaters decide what they're going to run or do studios pay them to run them? But either way, I think those two things need to be treated a little more equally. And I think it'd be a win-win for everybody because then you'll get more exposure for both the originals and for crowd-pleasing type movies.
Right. Yeah. No, I think you make some good points there. And it's kind of a mixed bag, right? Because from what I've understood, like a good example from the last few years, especially post-COVID, was the Buzz Lightyear movie that they made, Lightyear. And I remember hearing reports that there were just like so many theaters in so many areas that were just playing Lightyear to empty rooms because they were contractually obligated, to have a specific amount of showings at every theater. And it kind of created this notion of like, these theaters could be showing different movies on these screens that are being taken up by a movie that ultimately didn't really do well in the theaters, which, is a shame because I liked Lightyear. I don't think it's, top tier Toy Story, but I thought it was a good movie.
Right.
But it came out at a weird time and then kind of forcing it on people. But on the flip side, you have movies that don't have the ability to have word of mouth. I'm kind of curious your take on this too. Well, like I think about, I've already mentioned Better Man, and I've literally been an advocate for that film. But like the movie was taken out of theaters so quickly after, even though the reviews online from critics and from audience members who did see it were positive, it was taken out of theaters so quickly because it just didn't do well financially. And I think one of the ones that surprised me the most in 2024 was the Kevin Costner Western film he did, Horizon, an American Saga or American Story or something like that. And I remember that it was supposed to be a 2-part movie, and the next part was like scheduled to release like 3 months later. Well, here we are now, nearing a year since its release, and they've yet to announce a date for the sequel. Is it going to streaming? Is it going to go to theaters? I don't know if you saw that movie. Did you see Horizon?
I did not, but I did hear what you're talking about, like the sequels in limbo, from what I've heard.
Right, and the movie was built to be the whole. It's essentially, in a lot of ways, I think it could have been a better miniseries or TV show, but as a movie, it's a nearly 3. I think it's like 3 hours long, and it follows a bunch of different characters. Kevin Costner's character, because he's the main star and like the director and stuff, I guess you could say he's the main character. But there are so many characters because it's got these people over here, these people over here. And some of those stories culminate, especially as you get to the end, but it leaves you on a cliffhanger. Most of those, like all the stories are built to be concluded in the sequel. So it's not a movie that has like its own beginning, middle, and end. Right. It feels more like a beginning and then like a portion of the middle that was leading into like kind of like a big middle showdown that was clearly meant to be set up for the next one. But I remember I went to go see it 2 weeks after it came out. I didn't see it on its first weekend or the weekend after that. And I went with my mom to go catch it. And I shit you not, dude, I walked out of the theater and I looked at my phone just to kind of like go and like put it on Letterboxd. And the first thing I see was like literally while we were in the movie, the studio announced that they were going to push back the release date of the sequel because of the fact that the first one wasn't doing well in theaters while I'm in the theaters watching it. And now, it's one of those things where like I think about a lot of fans or a lot of viewers of that movie who maybe caught it won't even be thinking about that by the time the sequel comes out. And there's also that thing of like, hey, now I got to go back and rewatch this 3-hour movie to just even remember where we are. So this is a very long-winded question to kind of ask you, like, what's your take on like the release window, especially post-COVID, where like it just feels like certain movies just have like literally like it's like they just fart and they come out and they're gone, dude.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. That really screwed up a lot of people's planning, I think, in general. With that, and then there was like the writer's strike after that, and all this stuff going on that just put the whole industry in like limbo as far as future releases, things that were announced. I know that Marvel in particular has redone their schedule several times since then, and that Horizon example almost makes me think of TV shows that are in limbo after every season when they come out, and they
Right.
will leave you on a cliffhanger, and some have been totally canceled with no resolution whatsoever. So that is what that's reminding me of. Now, I think wasn't that project Horizon? Didn't he fund that himself? Wasn't he like a
Yeah,
big?
yeah. He funded it himself. He filmed the two films simultaneously. He like the second one, from what I understand, was ready to go. Like it was gonna be
Okay,
out. I want to say like legit, like it was meant to be like 3 months after.
okay,
And it's just like it's really interesting. One thing I want to keep hearing your thoughts, but just to kind of like chime in on this point too, it's like I was just talking to, like I mentioned before, Sarah last week, and one thing we brought up in that conversation was the upcoming Beatles movies that are coming out. I don't know if you've heard about how they're going to release that, but there's 4 Beatles movies that are coming out with the 4 main actors who are going to be playing those 4 Beatles movies, but they're meant to be released like on top of one another. Like all 4
uh,
movies are going to be out. Like I think their plan is to have all 4 movies be in theaters at the same time.
I don't
So
think they're
that
gonna do that.
Yeah, right. Or like, and if they don't do that, they're meant to kind of like layer over one another, where you
Mhm.
like go and see them like within close proximity. Like from what I've read, that's the intention. And it just begs the question: what happens if the first one doesn't do well? Are they just going to scrap the other 3 that they've made? Are they going to still release them? Like, what's the plan?
I don't know. I mean, it's not. I wouldn't put it past them. I wouldn't put it past them to never release part two of that thing as well. I mean, we've seen now films that are exclusive to streaming platforms be completely wiped and no way to ever watch them again.
Right.
So it's like a sad thing that is happening right now. I mean, I would hate to be someone that worked on one of those projects just to see it never come out for a tax write-off. Um, I don't know. I think we're in this time where we're not getting the turnout that is expected. Maybe they just need to reevaluate how they market things in general and how much money they put behind it. I've always been told that a film will spend the same budget it costs to make the film on its marketing,
Right.
and which is absurd to me. So if there's a
Agreed.
way that they could, they're almost going to have to reevaluate how they're doing things with things like physical media, you know, going down, so that revenue source isn't going to be there for them. And everybody on these streaming platforms where they get paid a fraction of what they used to get paid for physical releases, making the money back that they've spent on a film has got to be their number one priority so they can keep producing good films, whether that means fewer releases throughout the year or whether it means dialing back on the marketing spend. People are thinking about this and looking at these numbers, I'm sure, but um, something's got to change because we can't just have people's work taken off the shelves from us that isn't the intent of the filmmaker or the director. Because what if you were the director and wanted your films released simultaneously or overlapping, and the studio at the last second's like, oh, you know what, that one didn't do well, so I guess we're just not going to show the other ones. Like, that would make me so mad. I would never want to work for that studio again.
Right.
And then now that studio is missing out on a creative source that they could use to potentially make some earnings in the future. The whole system is kind of flawed in a way. But
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's tough, right? Because like streaming has definitely put a wrench in it, right? Then
Mhm.
COVID put a whole other wrench in it because I think it unfortunately trained audiences to go and watch movies when they hit streaming. Specifically, you'll tend to notice sometimes a Disney film will do well, like Moana did really well this past year in terms of the box office, but that's already a popular franchise. But like something like Encanto, right? Encanto is so popular now. It's got all these theme park expansions. It's it's like one of the biggest movies that's watched monthly on Disney Plus. But if you look back at what it did in theaters, it didn't really do numbers compared to how popular the songs became and the movie became. But it's because people waited till streaming. The second it hit Disney Plus, I remember that I was reading that like the numbers were just astronomical,
oh
and they've
yeah,
kind of consistently remained being that. And so we're seeing kind of a thing where like I think that happened with one of the last Pixar films too, Elemental, where it didn't do well in theaters as much as other Pixar films,
and,
and then it did well on streaming.
yeah. There's some Disney Pixar stuff that, like Luca, that never got a theatrical release.
Right, right.
So they just took it directly to streaming. So I think we are training audiences, and everybody knows now, like, okay, if a movie comes out this week and it doesn't do too good, in 2 weeks I can watch it on streaming if I don't want
Right.
to spend money in the theater. Or if it does do good, okay, it might be a few months, but I'll still be able to watch it at home. I think whatever we can do to get more people to go to experience the theater experience is better for everyone. Really.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think on the flip side to what you were also saying too about like these studios kind of messing up these dynamics with some of these creators. I mean, in that whole madness, you had WB releasing all of their films day and date, which essentially screwed up their relationship with longtime collaborator Christopher Nolan, who now is likely never. I think what he did Oppenheimer with Universal, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't know who's doing his new film, but I know he pretty much vowed to not do anything with Warner Brothers anymore, even though he had released a ginormous chunk of, I think, most of his films with Warner Brothers. So yeah, it is an interesting thing to see how the film world is going to bounce back, because something's got to give. Like you said, something's got to change. It's like you can't continue to be releasing these films and pulling them out, or even to tackle on Warner Brothers again. They have that the Batgirl movie that they decided to with Brendan Fraser and it had what's it called, Michael Keaton as Batman, and he had done that shortly after he did The Flash, and there's all these images and stuff. It's a completed DC movie that they just decided, oh yeah, we're just going to write it off for tax purposes.
Yeah.
And we also saw that with Coyote versus Acme, which was a Looney Tunes film that was supposed to come out. Now there's rumblings that Catch Up Entertainment, that just released the newest Looney Tunes movie, The Day the Earth Blew Up. There's rumors that they're trying to acquire that movie to release it, which hopefully they do. But it's just a shame, like a whole Looney Tunes movie, a whole Batgirl movie, just sitting on the shelf. They made it. Cast, crew, special effects artists, they all came in to work on this movie, and then it doesn't get a release.
Yeah, that happened. That's happened with Warner Brothers releases. That's happened with Disney Plus releases, even series. Like there was a whole Willow series that is just gone. I don't even know if they released all of that or any of that. Or
they released one season. I did a rewatch of the first movie, or the original movie, with my wife, who had never seen it before, just before it started, so she could have seen it. I did a review for it on the channel. I reviewed the first season as it came out, and then I want to say like literally within 2 months, they announced that they were like removing it from Disney Plus, along with like a crap ton of their other stuff, just to kind of like, it was like right as the actor strike was happening too. So there was that business around the notion of them not, wanting to pay residuals to the actors. But yeah, I think where it really screws fans is like, if you find something that becomes like something special to you, like I couldn't imagine being a kid. Like when we were kids, it's like movies, when you're a kid, like movies really make an imprint on you, like they still do today. But like when you're a kid, you'll hold on to that movie for decades, And so I can't imagine seeing something that I fell in love with as a kid on streaming, only to eventually discover that it's like nowhere to be found. Like I can't even get a physical copy of it or anything.
Yeah, that's like the downside to there being less physical releases and stores taking them out of their shelves and all that kind of stuff. It drives me crazy. Like I still collect physical media whenever I can, as far as movies. I think especially that are like action movies or franchises that are important to me, like Back to the Future or the Jurassic World series, things like that. And then horror movies, Criterion movies, things like that, I do collect physically, just because I like the peace of mind of knowing that I have that in my hand. But let's say you like a specific, like, okay, everybody loves Severance, right? What if they just decided to take that off of Apple TV Plus, And not saying that they would, but it's things like that are created specifically for streaming media platforms that I know you can buy the first season on Blu-ray right now, but there's not like a 4K release for it. There is no release for season 2 yet. But like, what if that didn't exist physically, and then they just took it off, like Willow? You can never watch that series again. And that's like the saddest thing, that your legacy, if you were involved in that project, or even if you just grew up with that show or whatever the case may be, not having access to that, I think it just turns, number one, it turns more people to piracy. And number two, it's just a big turnoff for everybody not having faith or trust that, okay, if I'm going to invest the time to watch this and I really like it, like, am I going to have access to watch it again?
Right. Yeah, it's a dangerous thing, man. And we're in this weird time where like the precedent has been set in a way that I think really affects creatives. It affects the ability for even actors to maybe be in something that becomes a cult. film. You know, like I think people have forgotten the notion of like even in the modern day, there's so many popular movies. Like so many of these movies we're talking about that like get these like way down the line sequels or remakes. Like a lot of times they're cult movies. You know, like I always think about like the movie Seven. You know, with
Yep.
Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman. Like that movie wasn't like a big box office explosion. It was once it hit like physical media that it became bigger and bigger and bigger. And now it's one of those movies that people quote decades later. It's looked at as maybe some people's favorite, like Morgan Freeman and I'm sorry, Brad Pitt like movies. It's like, but that wasn't the case like in the moment, and that's okay. Sometimes movies just need time to breathe, kind of like you were mentioning earlier in the conversation, the notion of just like, certain things being more popular 6 months to a year later, sometimes a couple years later. Like it's just about finding an audience. When you remove these things all together, God forbid you like in the modern day are building a watch list and you don't get to something until like a year or two later, and then you find out, oh, they
Right.
took it off of streaming. I'm
Yeah,
never
like
gonna be able to see it now.
like what if Willow didn't catch on right at the beginning, but let's say 2 years later, people were like, "Oh, have you guys heard of this?" I mean, it's been a while, but that happens all the time. It happens all
Right.
the time. And if it's gone, what are you going to do?
Right. And they didn't even give it 2 months. I think I can't tell you how many people I had comment on my review for the Willow series saying like, oh, looked for this. Where is it? Like they clicked on my video, and it's not like I had like a billion comments like that, but it was just like enough people, like one or two people. That's how word of mouth spreads. It's
Right.
like, again, to not to beat a dead horse, but to bring back Better Man. Like I told so many people to go see that movie, and I kept telling people go see it in theaters while it's there, and then it was taken out. And I had friends who eventually caught it on Paramount Plus over time, but it was like you just remove that ability for people to go see things when you like just kind of cut and run super quickly. But yeah, man, it's interesting. I'm curious to see where film goes. As we come to the end of this, of course, because I know you do have you got somewhere else to be, and I really appreciate you taking the time to sit here and chat. It's been a blast so far. I wanted to quickly just ask you about your experience with the interview of the director of Stolen Kingdom, which is a movie you got to check out at the Florida Film Festival.
Oh yeah.
How was that experience? I really enjoyed watching your interview. Was it a nerve-wracking experience? I know that you mentioned that this was kind of the first time you were covering a film festival properly.
Right.
So what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was cool. So I guess I kind of got lucky that I actually knew someone that was friends with that the director of that film. So she kind of did a comfortable introduction for me, and that was very helpful. But yeah, coming up with the questions, it took me a while to think of, and then I actually watched the film earlier that evening, and had to kind of revise my questions based on what I saw in the movie. And I thought it was a fun way to kind of interact. It was my first time interacting with anyone on camera as far as that was on screen or involved in the creation of a film, which was exciting for me. I know it takes a lot of hard work from cast and crew to do, to put anything out there. Just from my own experience, I know it's a very big time commitment, and so I certainly respect everyone that makes film. But it was a cool experience to be able to, ask somebody questions like this. I was a little nervous. It was my first time, but I mean, I'm sure that happens with everybody. But yeah, I mean, I thought it went well. He gave some great answers. I've loved theme parks my whole life, and this happened to be a documentary on a big conspiracy that happened probably about 5 years ago, or probably a little longer than that now, 5-6 years ago, here in Central Florida. And so it was cool to be able to speak with someone that was familiar with the same theme park space that I was familiar with, and kind of get their input and why this was an important story for them to tell, and exactly what went into the making of this film. It's a really cool guy.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, no, you seemed really off the cuff and comfortable when you were doing it, but I've never had the opportunity to interview somebody in person like that, so I can only imagine it's a little bit more nerve-wracking because there's a little bit of like an in the moment present. I have had the opportunity to do a couple of these, but like I was telling somebody else, I've usually done those like in like pajama pants, so it's a little bit more comfortable that the second it's over I could just kind of move on. But I thought you did a great job, man. It was really cool to see you do that, and hopefully you're able to do more of that as time goes on. But yeah, as we wrap this up, man, I just wanted to kind of give the floor to you quickly to plug anything you have coming up, anything that you're working on, or anything you recently released that you want people to check out. To anybody who is watching live or watching on YouTube, or even if you're listening to this on Spotify, in the description box below, you guys can find the link to Mike's channel. And definitely go and check out Mike's moviereviews.com. But yeah, just want to give the floor to you to kind of plug anything you want to plug.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on here. I really appreciate it. Again, this is my first time doing anything like this, so thank you for this opportunity. As far as stuff coming up, I do have a really cool video that's probably going to come out next week or so, and that is going to be a tie-in between the new Universal Theme Park Epic Universe and movies that are centered around that place. So I'm actually going to go out there tomorrow for a preview day and film some content at the park as how it relates to the films that it's based on. So I think that's going to be a really interesting long form video. Like I said, I don't do a lot of long form, but I think this would be a good one to put out. I like keeping my long form videos kind of unique. I never do anything that I feel like a million other people are doing. So I just want to keep things different and fresh. And yeah, so thanks again for having me on here and plugging my channel. I really appreciate that. It's been fun time so far, and I look forward to lots and lots of movie reviews in the future, and hopefully get out to some more film festivals. Have you ever been to a festival before?
No, I mean, last year I went to a screening at a film festival, kind of like I did this year, but I haven't done a film festival proper, and I think it's definitely something on my list. I think this coming year, when the Florida Film Festival comes back around, I'll try to be more on top of like applying for press accreditation and trying to see if I can just, get on top of it, request off some more time proper to like go and see these movies. Cause it's something I've always wanted to do. Of course, ideally, I think, doing what we do to be able to one day do something like Sundance or, some of the overseas ones like Cannes or something like that is the ideal situation. But I have been able to check out some movies through screenings, from the festivals. Like this last year, the Berlin Film Festival sent me over a couple of movies. I'm sure you probably received some of the same ones to cover. So I covered some of those. But yeah, this last time when we went to The Legend of Ochi was one of the first times I'd like seen a movie at a film festival. But as you know already, I wasn't able to go to the other screenings for the film festival. So I don't know that I'd say I've done the film festival experience yet, but I'd certainly like to, for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm going to try and make it out to TIFF this upcoming year and see where it goes from there. But yeah, it's been great. I love being here. Thanks for having me again. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure, man. I really appreciate it. And for anybody, again, who's watching this live after the fact or listening to this on Spotify, definitely go ahead over to Mike's channel, Mike's Movie Reviews. If you type that in on YouTube, you will find it. It's the first thing that pops up. And head over to the same name.com to go and check out his written reviews and all of that fun stuff. So a big thanks to all of you guys for listening and watching. A big thanks again. And we'll see you guys next week. I will have more content here on the channel for you guys in the coming weeks and another random rambling next week. See you guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks. See ya.